Rams house, welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report presented by Prize Picks. Guys, play alongside all of us here at Chat Sports. When you sign up for Prize Picks, use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups. On today's show, though, my friends, we're going to be breaking down the latest and greatest Rams depth chart. So after the Myles Garrett trade, we haven't really gone through updated depth charts yet, plus everything we've learned coming out of OTAs. Obviously, the Rams canceled their mandatory minicamp that would have been June 15th through 16th just over this past week. But on today's show, I want to take a look position by position and kind of get everybody up to speed on where things stand for this Rams depth chart. And we're going to talk about some of the biggest roster battles on this thing and maybe a different way to look at one of those roster battles that we've discussed a lot on the channel so far. But let's get things started with the QB depth chart. Most important position in football, you got to talk about the guy slinging the rock. Obviously, especially when you draft one in the first round, Ty Simpson. Finally, we got that Rams headshot for him added into our depth charts here as well. But as of right now, guys, the biggest conversation in this room is who's going to be QB2. And I'm not telling you Stetson's QB2 for the whole season, but he is right now. He's taken the vast majority of the backup snaps behind Matthew Stafford throughout 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s. It'll be interesting to see how that trend continues through training camp, though. Again, we know the Rams are going to take it easy with Matthew Stafford this offseason. We know the Rams are going to build rest days into his schedule. There's going to be entire days where it's just Stetson, Ty, and potentially Matthew Caldwell, if he's still kicking around as well, on this roster out there working at QB. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for both of these guys to get their work in, and from a Ty perspective, to build back in this QB competition, because as of right now, it's clear that the experience that Stetson has, the time he's had in this system, has been a huge boon to him in this competition, has really helped him grow, has really helped him push ahead so far of Ty Simpson. But it's not out of the woods. This competition is far from over. Again, if you listen to Sean McVay, he's looking for the real football action, and that starts in training camp, and that starts in the preseason. So it'll be the most important moments for this QB competition. But once again, Stetson seems to have the lead. Moving on. Let's talk about the RB depth chart. Let's talk about another room where competition is a big theme. Not really at the top. Obviously, just like the QB depth chart, things feel very settled at the top of this thing. Although I do expect a closer to 50-50 split for Kyren and Corum. Before we get into the other guys on this depth chart, I want to talk about our two locked starters, Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. Obviously, those guys have been a tandem for the last couple seasons, but I think this will be, as we saw increasingly last year, Corum's role, big dramatic jump for him in year 2. I expect year 3 will continue to see that role rise. I think it won't be at the detriment of Kyren Williams. I think this will help him stay fresh, help him get the most efficiency out of the work that he does get, but I think they want to continue to involve Corum in this offense as well. And then you get into the final 3 guys here. And one of these 3 won't be around. And it's interesting to project which of Ronnie Rivers, Jarquez Hunter, and Dean Connors is going to fall off this roster. Dean Connors feels like the kind of favorite right now, if you will. Dean Connors feels like the guy you would go with, the smart pick, as it were, of the 3. Hunter, someone they invested a 4th-round pick in 2025. I don't know if they're quite ready to move off of him, even though he didn't play a role his rookie season. Ronnie Rivers just got a new contract with this team, although it has basically no guaranteed money. I feel like Connors, at the end of the day, might be the guy that falls off this roster. We talked about him on our mailbag show yesterday as a potential option as a returner, and that may be his best way to stick around. But again, it's not something he's really done a whole lot of. So it's going to be a tough competition, even with Xavier Smith, who obviously, while he's much maligned by Rams fans, that's the incumbent in that room. That's the guy who held it down all season long before a disastrous finish in the NFC Championship game. They won't throw out the rest of the year very quickly, though. Expect that to be a tight competition. If Connors can win it, he can hold on this roster, and then it's trouble for one of those two guys. But a situation to monitor as we go. We're going to keep rolling through this roster, but before we do, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, guys, and that is our friends over at Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. My friends, I absolutely love placing lineups with Prize Picks to make watching sports more exciting. I think it just brings a whole new level to getting into the sports action. Whether you're watching the World Cup, whether you're watching some of the baseball that is well underway as well, it has never been easier to add that excitement than it is with Prize Picks because it's so easy to put together a lineup. All you have to do is pick from 2 to 6 players, and you can easily select their more or less on a number of different stat projections, whether you're picking from goals, assists, stat projections on season-long picks from professional football as well. You can go with some of that action. Or yesterday, I had an lineup on U.S. versus Australia. Excuse me. Gosh, I'm finding my words here. A lineup on U.S. versus Australia. I actually believe that this one did not ultimately end up cashing for me, which is a bit of a bummer. But at the end of the day, it's still fun to have that lineup to ride while you watch the action. And if you guys want to get in on all that action with me and all my buddies here at Chat Sports on Prize Picks, make sure you sign up with our promo code HMA. Guys, download the Prize Picks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and the description below. All right, let's get back to discussing the Rams depth charts. Let's talk about this receiver room. And the way I want to talk about this receiver room is a little different than the way that we've talked about it in the past. I want to look at things from the perspective, obviously the biggest question here is that receiver 3 role. Who is going to fill it? And we've talked about a number of different options to do it. And one of the biggest ones, obviously in the receiver room, is Jordan Whittington. You've also got Mupfield still in there. Xavier Smith actually led all of the options we've talked about in receiving yards last season. I know a lot of you guys don't love Xavier Smith, but at the end of the day, he was productive in that deep threat role last year, And then you also have CJ Daniels, the rookie. But somebody else that we've talked about that should factor into this conversation just as much, even though his position technically isn't receiver, is Terrence Ferguson. Right now, I've got him as tight end 2 on our depth chart. But he, I think this year, has an opportunity to play a very fascinating role for this Rams team as almost a hybrid receiver tight end. It might be best to start thinking of Terrence Ferguson as the third option in the receiving room at receiver, because I think that's going to be primarily what he does. I think we're going to see him line up in line a little bit as a true tight end, but I think we're also going to see him line up in the slot. I think we're also going to see him line up out wide in some 13 personnel sets as well with another tight end on the field. And when you think about that, it starts to make a lot more sense why this Rams team thought it was necessary to go out and add a Max Clare, to make that move in the draft. Because again, if you don't technically consider from their perspective Terrence Ferguson to be a true tight end, then it makes sense to continue adding to that tight end depth chart. Obviously, you don't have a complete room at receiver right now beyond Puka and Devontae Adams. I think that's pretty clear, but it can be a complete room if Terrence Ferguson is able to step up and fill that third receiver role by playing in a very hybrid style. And then, of course, you have the future of your actual tight end room, with most of those guys being on expiring contracts in the guy you drafted in Max Clare. I think it's very smart roster building. We continue to see that philosophy from Les Snead play out over this offseason of, hey, let's of course prepare for trying to go out and attack a Super Bowl this year. Let's go attack a window, but let's not do that at the expense of being a competitive team for the future. How do we prepare for things that might come up down the road as we want to pay our biggest stars? We might have to let some of these guys in the tight end room go. Okay, Max Clare can step up alongside Terrence Ferguson playing that kind of hybrid role. I think things are really bright for the future of this room. Let's move on to another room that has similar interesting conversations to be had, which we'll continue to discuss throughout this offseason, a little bit less on today's show. But a lot of guys in this offensive line depth chart need new money. one of which is Warren McClendon, another of which is Steve Avila, and then, of course, Kevin Dotson, also looking for a new contract, as well as Coleman Shelton. 4 of your 5 starters, all looking for new deals here. But outside of that, there's 2 big notes for this room. The first of which, if you missed it, just 2 days ago, the Rams waived one of their undrafted free agents. Chad Lindbergh was waived with an injury settlement. He was a right guard / kind of a center from North Carolina, They signed him and Austin Blaskey together out of North Carolina as undrafted free agents. Lindbergh seems to have gotten hurt throughout the training camp, not training camp just yet, OTA process, and the Rams ultimately released him with an injury settlement, which guarantees the rest of his contract, and then allows him to go out and get into the market again if anyone does ultimately want to pick him up. But an injury-protected release for Chad Lindbergh. So they move on from him. And then, of course, the other news that we've got to discuss, the other thing that we've got to discuss with this room is the continuing to develop situation with Alaric Jackson at left tackle. It's one of those things where we still don't know exactly how this is going to play out. He was cleared of felony charges, but he's still facing misdemeanor charges, and he's, of course, still facing a pending, almost certainly, investigation from the NFL into his actions as far as they may violate the personal conduct policy, which, again, we know he's already violated once already. It could become a conversation that this Rams team needs to have. If the NFL is clearly looking into this, if things are not looking good from that perspective and a suspension seems likely, we're going to continue to discuss options at left tackle that they might have to add, because you look at that depth chart behind Jackson right now, A.J. Arcuri and David Quessenberry, you don't feel good about either of those dudes stepping up and playing the most important position along the offensive line. Switching gears here, switching sides of the football to our defensive line depth chart, our pass rusher depth chart. And guys, doesn't it look great to see Myles Garrett in Rams blue? Oh man, that is a fun feeling, is it not? But this depth chart is fun looking as well. Even without the potential return of Aaron Donald, which of course, much ado about that, and deservedly so, man, is this a great room. Man, is this one of the strongest points of this Rams roster. And I truly think underratedly so. Obviously, Myles Garrett gets a lot of attention, but there is so much talent in this room beyond Garrett, and he is going to open it up for all of these guys in so many ways. He's going to help Poona Ford be a better run defender. He's going to help so many guys in the pass rush sense be better. I want to talk about opportunity knocking for a few guys here. I think it's the best way to look at it. And I think opportunity knocks for no one in this room greater than it does, or louder maybe, for Byron Young. It is highly likely that Byron Young is going to find himself on a different roster in 2027, which is sad. I love Agent Zero. I know a lot of you guys love Agent Zero as well. He's been a great Ram throughout his time in Los Angeles. But it's the reality of making an acquisition like Myles Garrett. He's got to move on from some of these guys. Can't keep everybody anymore. But Byron Young, coming off of a 12-sack season where he could already make a lot of money had he hit free agency this offseason, has an opportunity to go even harder this year, to be even better this year, to create even more production for himself in a contract season and get absolutely bagged out this offseason. But we're going to benefit from that contract year, contract-motivated Byron Young, who's also going to benefit from the presence of Myles Garrett across from him. Obviously, Jared Verse was a presence to contend with in his own right, but he was no Myles Garrett, and Byron Young is really going to benefit from increased one-on-ones because, again, you've got other guys to contend with on this Rams defensive line. You can't give all your attention to Byron Young and Jared Verse when you've also got big Kobie Turner, the conductor, coming through the interior. And man, oh man, is this guy going to roll this season. He, I think, is going to get paid by this Rams team. I'm just really praying that they do it before the season starts, guys. because I think he's going to go off this year. I think he's going to increase his ability in run defense. I think he's going to shine as a pass rushing threat as well alongside Myles Garrett. I think he's going to put up some monster numbers and wake up the NFL to the idea that he is one of the best interior defensive linemen in our game right now, especially when it comes to the ability to get after the quarterback. He is going to have a field day this year alongside Byron Young. Somebody else who won't be quite as productive as the top two guys, almost certainly, unless he really breaks out this year, is Josiah Stewart, but opportunity knocks for him as well. You can't give all the snaps to Myles Garrett and to Byron Young, and as you've kind of depleted the youth on your depth chart trading Jared Verse, Josiah Stewart should be given a lot of that run. You need to know what you have in him. He got some primetime work in the playoffs last season. They leaned on him in big-time moments, so the trust is there, and he delivered at times. He also had some rough ones. But I think he can continue to develop. And again, he's going to benefit from the increased attention from Myles Garrett, decreased attention on himself. And then lastly, this one's a little bit of a different narrative here, but Tommen Fox has a big opportunity here as well to secure a spot on this depth chart. Tommen Fox is going to battle in this room, maybe not for a role in the pass rush rotation, but I think he can truly be a big benefit to this team as far as special teams goes. Very different narrative than these other three guys, but he's in that room as well, and I think opportunity knocks for him, but just in very different ways. I think his opportunity to help this team is by helping them grow as a special teams unit, an area where they really struggled, and something he was a big benefactor for in New York when he was with the Giants. Moving on. Speaking of a room that struggled lately, this linebacker depth chart, I think fairly so. I'm going to evaluate this as the room, and we're just really looking at the interior here with the way the Rams use linebackers. Nate Landman, Omar Speights, Sean Dolak, Grant Stewart, Evan Neal. You could throw Troy Reeder in this conversation, of course, as well. Nikhai Hill-Green, the undrafted free agent. This is pretty easily the room with the biggest questions at the top. I like the Landman, guys. I really do, but I wish I could like him more. I wish I could like more of what we saw after we paid Nate Landman. The Rams doing something they don't usually do, which is give big money to an interior linebacker, something they neglected to do with Ernest Jones, which of course ultimately resulted in him heading off to Tennessee and then winning a Super Bowl in Seattle, which should grind your gears. Definitely ground mine. And now you've signed Nate Landman to this big contract because he played really well early on last season, and then we saw him falter, especially in the playoffs. We need him to get back to that guy that we saw early on last year. The reason that the Rams gave you the bag, brother. Obviously, he comes over from Atlanta as a primary special teamer. The Rams thought they found a gem early last season. It really felt like they did with the production that they got from him. I want him to get back to that status. I want him to be motivated this year on a team that's added so many parts to this defense to help them perform better. You need to be a part of the turning tide in the right direction. And him, Omar Speights as well. Speights had a really rough NFC Championship game. Could not get Ken Walker on the ground. I'm looking to see him come back more motivated this season to play much better. Next up, this DB depth chart, man. This makes me happy. This makes me a happy guy to look at this DB depth chart, guys, especially after last season. I think every Rams fan should just smile a little bit. Just like the pass rusher room with having Myles Garrett in it, having guys like McDuffie and Watson to play those 1 and 2 roles in this room makes you feel incredibly good about this team's prospects as far as coverage goes next season. But what I still don't feel great about is the depth. I still don't feel great about the young guys in this room and what might happen if, God forbid, you have an injury to one of the guys you went out and made a blockbuster move for, whether it's Trent McDuffie or Jaylen Watson. Either of those guys getting hurt is going to force an Emmanuel Forbes to be a starter. It's going to force a Cam Lampkin to potentially push in as a starter. You lose Quentin Lake, you might be starting Nizer for Kyren in a hurry, an undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. I'm sure about 10 people watching this video are familiar with. No disrespect to Nizer for Kyren. But this room, at the end of the day, needs more support. And I think you can make a move in free agency if you want to do it, or you just need somebody to step up. At the end of the day, somebody that we are not counting on may need to perform better. or you might need to bring somebody like this in off of the free agency market. We've talked about a lot of these options before in past videos. We could hit them again if you guys want to see me do that. Just let me know in the comments if we want to dive deeper on some of these options. Obviously, L'Jarius Sneed rolled off the market recently to the Kansas City Chiefs, but Rasul Douglas is still out there. He's played great ball for the Packers. He was with the Dolphins last season. Trayvon Diggs has been up and down at times. Marshawn Lattimore, he's kind of washed at this point. Kenny Moore could be an interesting option to upgrade that depth in the slot as well. A lot of conversations to be had about these guys. I'm not going to say it's a great selection of names. There's a reason they're all still available, but you could absolutely grab them as upgrades for depth at varying prices depending on who you're going to target. We could have that conversation in more depth if you guys want us to. Let me know by spamming those S's. If you want to see us sign someone, want to see us break that down in more depth, drop an S in the comment section below. If you're good off that, give me a P in the comment section below to pass on making an addition there. Let's round out today's show. We can't neglect our specialists. We cannot neglect our special teams, special players, special plays, baby. Harrison Mevis, he's our kicker, the thicker kicker, Money Mevis. He should be the starter. No one else has been brought in this offseason to compete with him, and I think he earned that role. We saw him show up last year. It's where he earned the Money Mevis title in the game against Chicago, showing up in the cold, in the wind, in the snow, in the divisional against the Bears to send Chicago packing home, or not really packing, they were already home, but keep him home. Ethan Evans, been a good punter for us over the last couple of years. They did ultimately pick up his tender, which did surprise me a little bit. It makes him a very highly paid punter, but he's around. Joe Cardona brought in to help with the special teams unit from the Miami Dolphins, veteran long snapper. Excited about that addition. Think it should help with Bubba Ventrone's team. Jordan Whittington right now projects as your kick returner, and Xavier Smith projects as your punt returner. But again, this is going to be a competition all offseason long. And again, you're not going to use Kyren Williams the way you saw them use him in the NFC Championship to fill in for an Xavier Smith who they just clearly lost faith in that moment. But it's tough to say where they stand with Xavier Smith right now. I'm not going to tell you he's not going to be the punt returner coming into next season just because he had a big muff and a big moment. That's never how the Rams have operated. They don't make emotional decisions. They make logical, rational ones, and they use a larger sample than just the one sample we saw in a big moment of Xavier Smith messing up. That's not going to ruin him forever in the Rams' eyes. You saw that very clearly with this team showing their faith in him in picking up his restricted free agent tender. And again, I know a lot of you guys don't love that move. I know a lot of you guys don't love hearing me say that, but it's the reality of the way this Rams team operates. For better or worse, they believe in their guys. They believe in their practices. That's going to round it out for today's episode of the Rams Report. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and thanks for spending a little bit of it with us. As always, we appreciate you, and as always, let's go Rams.